Police Minister Senzo Mchunu says the state of the country's crime intelligence is extremely worrying. He was speaking during a meeting of Parliament's Police Committee where the latest crime statistics were discussed. Members of Parliament have been told, or rather has told SAPS management, that the crime situation is getting perpetually worse and questioned the effectiveness of the country's crime intelligence. The minister also told Parliament that extortion has been emerging over time and has left communities agitated. Joining us to discuss the extortion rackets and the minister's plans to address them is Chad Thomas from IRS Thomas Forensic Investigators. Good evening, Chad. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So we heard the minister there take Parliament through the modus operandi yesterday of these extortionists, also stating that this reality now has been long in the making. What exactly does this mean? Does it mean that this crisis could have been averted through timeliest intervention?
Oh, most definitely. We're in the eye of a perfect storm at the moment. We don't have sufficient police officers in South Africa. If one looks at the ratio per capita for police officers per 100,000 of the population, we're sitting at about half of the required amount of police officers as per the United Nations. But that doesn't take into consideration the fact that South Africa has some of the most violent crime in the world. So we would need to at least double our police force and ensure that we have effective policing, effective investigation skills, and of course, successful prosecutions off the back of all of that. What the minister is saying about the intelligence services is very interesting. Our intelligence services were hollowed out during the capture years. They were used to settle political scores. But we have a very robust crime intelligence division within the police. And if one looks at the successes that they were having, specifically their national office, when it came to kidnap for ransom, for example, because they were embracing public-private partnerships, because they were running intelligence-driven investigations, they were able to infiltrate, disrupt, and dismantle certain syndicates. And if we can replicate that on a countrywide basis, we will see results. But it means far more resources, far more capacity being given to our intelligence services, specifically within SAPS.
And it seems he shares those views that the intelligence system needs to be stepped up. But I still want to deal with the genesis of this problem, because some are saying there was clearly a lack of foresight on the part of SAPS, because for the longest time, we have been talking about the construction mafia, and now there's absolutely no sector that is untouched. Could they not have foreseen that if you've got this just in the construction industry, it is going to morph into all other industries?
We've concentrated primarily as a country on focusing on violent contact crimes, and our police force to a large extent has been very reactive. So we see these force multipliers on the ground, Operation Chanela, arresting over 600,000 people in the last year, but we don't see this equating to effective prosecutions. The fact remains is that the South African police service right now is short 8,000 detectives, and within the Hawks, they're only 60% capacitated. So it doesn't matter how many people you investigate if you don't have seasoned investigators conducting those investigations. Because if they hand those dockets over to the NPA won't enroll them. The NPA aren't going to enroll dockets that they don't believe are going to be successfully prosecuted. And therein lies the massive problem in South Africa. Our previous minister used to wax lyrically about putting more boots on the ground. There were going to be 10,000 new members, but he didn't speak about the natural attrition of detectives that were leaving the South African police services due to retirement age, early retirement, moving across to the private sector, or being frustrated because they never had the resources to investigate their cases. One must remember they were working on 2 to 3 times the amount of dockets they should have been working. So we need to look at intelligence and we need to look at investigations.
When you speak of more boots on the ground and better skilled police officers, ever so often when we would be reporting at the crime in Bezos, the community members, beyond just wanting boots on the ground, they seem to be hinting at a need to rotate some of these police officers because there was a trust deficit. And even yesterday, listening in Parliament specifically to Mbuyiseni Ndlozi of the Economic Freedom Fighters, they went on to state that there is also a problem here where some police officers act unethically, where in most instances or some instances they could be aiding some of these syndicates, the extortion rackets, some of them look to them for protection. So what happens in that respect? That you're going to recruit more police officers, but you've also, beyond the skills issue and just the personnel issue, you've got individuals that seem to be compromised as well within the force.
Look, you've got a police force of about 180,000 people, of which around 150,000 are actual police officers. The other 30,000 are administration clerks and related support services. You're going to have bad apples. It's not to say that the whole police force is corrupt, but what we are seeing is that there is this mistrust between communities and policing on the ground. And you've made a very valid point in saying surely there should be some kind of way of rotating police officers between policing stations, districts, areas, and even provinces. And you're 100% right. However, we have to remember police officers, they need to also have a family life. They need to be close to their homes. They need to be able to socialize. And taking them and posting them in far-off areas, it's going to compound the problem. What we have right now is a situation where the major problem is to build the trust between communities, the structures that exist with the community policing forums, the policemen themselves, and most importantly, of course, to upskill the existing police officers and to bring more skills in to train up more members to be able to support the intelligence function, the investigation function, and thereafter we can look more towards the actual reactive function.
Chad, you actually raise a very important point around uprooting these police officers, that when the communities request that they be rotated, there is actually a genuine, legitimate problem here, that if you're going to uproot them and destabilize them so constantly, it means you could now have a situation where you're dealing with police officers with their own mental issues because they just lack the stability.
You're 100% right. You must remember in 1995, a year after democracy, the police force became an amalgamated police service. And policing changed. We even changed the names from a charge office to a client service center. Police officers that used to be recruited go to police college and then deployed to far-flung areas living in barracks. That was changed. And that whole approach seemed to be very victim, community, and policeman-centric, take into consideration what you've just said. But police wellness, the fact that we need more social workers, more psychologists, more counselors within the police is very important. Guys that are wearing that blue uniform with the police vest, with the gun on their side, they have to project this alter ego of being these really tough guys, but they are going in on a day-to-day basis, facing criminals that don't hesitate to shoot at them. One can just be bewildered at the amount of mental health issues that have gone undiagnosed within the police right now, and spare a thought for those police officers that are not brave enough to come out. They're brave enough to fight criminals. They're not brave enough to speak about the fact that they're suffering perhaps from PTSD or other issues related to the work that they're doing.
Chad, thank you very much for sharing those views with us this evening. That is Chad Thomas, IRS Forensic Investigator, speaking to us.